I think we're ready to start mixing.
So all that makes it a lot easier for volume control.
I mean, a lot of our work is done. I don't have to do, like with the vocals, I don't have to go through and do a bunch of vocal rides, turn stuff up and down.
Yeah.
You know, that can take, for a song, you can spend an hour just creating vocal rides. And what I was able to even them all out, and I'm like, I might spend, 5 minutes going through and listening through and turning up certain, phrases or words that are just not cutting through it as much as another. But yeah, it definitely makes it a lot more easy. And to me, all the, the tones and stuff are bigger, fatter. And for those of you watching, like I said, I usually start in my sessions with a kind of ballpark template, just so that the levels are in the ballpark, and that's going to be provided, so you guys can download it and and see where I start. And this is Tommy's session, so some things have been tweaked, but it's still not very far off from where I start.
Yeah.
It's when we started recording the drums, we plugged up, we hooked the mics up, got the gain structures. Like, hey, the drums sound pretty good. It's not like the snare was crazy loud or the tom you couldn't hear it or whatever. None of that. It's kind of in the ballpark, and as you can see here, I've kind of got a ballpark kind of mix happening where I usually start. Let's just see what the drums sound like. I'm gonna just solo the drums out. Cool. Yeah, one thing I usually try to do when I'm doing drum editing is get the drums kind of in the ballpark.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of drum editing that I normally usually do. Like this is, like I said, we've got solid organic takes. So actually, I might talk a little bit about. I'll try to talk a little bit about my sample, like blending and replacement process if we have time. We didn't use that on Tommy's record, and Tommy's performance was solid enough to where we don't really need it now. But like I said, there is one pretty standard process. Like I said earlier, like the accent cymbal stuff, I cut the ride since he didn't play the ride. If he did play the ride, I would just keep it where he played the ride. The hi-hat, but also the toms. The toms, if you listen to the toms, there's a lot of bleed from the other from the cymbals and stuff. And that can really kind of, because you want to pan your toms out usually. Not quite as hard right and left. If you have like 5 or 6 toms, you want to kind of like either, create a stereo field or stereo image as if you're standing in front of the kit or behind the kit, whatever your preference is there. But that can really smear your cymbal stereo image. It's pretty standard as far as panning or whatever. Most people leave the kick up the center. They leave the snare up the center. Some people pan the snare a little off center. It's all a preference. I usually leave them in the center. The toms, like I said, I'm a drummer, so I have to mix with drums pan from drummer perspective, or it just feels weird to me. It doesn't make sense, honestly, for the final product to be that way if you want, to project how you sound live or whatever. But a lot of the bands, a lot of the drummers like their drums pan stereo, they want to put the listener behind the kit. I know Blake likes that.
I like it like that too.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. It's a total preference. There's no right or wrong. I don't think anybody's going, hey, why is that ride on the left, or why is it on the right, Because what if the drummer's left-handed, like the drummer from Muse? I mean, it's panned audience perspective, but it sounds drummer perspective to me. Yeah. So, kind of one of those things. It's just a preference. But as far as the panning is concerned, like I said, my cymbals, I usually do my overheads left and right, just hard left and right. The accent cymbals, I usually pan those as to where they are in the kit. So if you have a China on your the drummer right, I just pan the mic to the right. If you have a splash in the middle, I leave it in the middle. You can get creative with it and do other things, but I try to just create the, since you're behind the drums, you're at least out in front of the drums, and it just gives us it makes it interesting and gives us some depth. Like I said, the far room, I keep mono in the middle. The room ambient tracks or whatever, I usually keep pan left and right. And this is just to create a sense of space, make the drums, make you feel like that you're in the room with the drums, either behind the drums or in front of the drums.
Yeah.
Or at the concert, you know. Just something that's been done since the inception of stereo. With this, I remember a lot of the early rock bands or whatever. They would put the drum set on the left and like the vocals on the right, and they did a lot of weird stuff.
The
and
Doors and
yeah, that's not as
Beatles.
popular now. You know, if somebody did that now, they'd be like, "Well, this is weird." But
Some bands still do it well, though. I mean, I think the right sound it still works for.
yeah, there's no rules with panning. You know, aside from you want the low end stuff needs to be pan centered because the human ear can't distinguish low end like low bass or the low kick drum, the low of the kick drum, whatever. We can't distinguish it being left or right. So literally, if you make the low frequency stuff stereo, it actually smears your mix. So anything, 100 hertz, maybe even up to 150 hertz sometimes, with the exception, in my opinion, of toms and guitars. But most of the low stuff, like bass guitars, lows of the low synth
Kick and
stuff.
everything.
Yeah, they have I use a plug-in from Brainworks called I don't know what it's called, but it has a thing called a mono maker on it that it actually makes the lows, 100 hertz or 100. You can set, the frequency wherever you want, but it makes all the lows mono on the mix or whatever. So that's a really useful tool, and it makes the it keeps your stereo field wide. It keeps your stereo field from being muddied up. But yeah, like I said, again, with the cymbals, I usually, this is a standard thing, I cut all the tom bleed, and I can, just because I've been doing this for a long time, I can see where the toms are. Tommy has this tom intro here. And I usually like about a second and a half of resonance. I think the standard's kind of like 1 second. I just like a little more. So here's a tom that he hit. I'll let a little bit of resonance go. And I'll fade down. Now some people do this thing where they actually cut it at a beat. And that's fine, but to me sometimes that can sound natural, especially if the drum's by itself. So I found that this technique works pretty well. And what I'm doing, you can see, I'm tabbing to transit to the beginning of it. And I've got my nudge set at 1.5, so I'm nudging over, making a cut, and that gives me the whole resonant of the toms, 1.5. Am I moving too fast, Tommy?
No.
And you guys can complain online if I'm moving too fast, and I'll slow down.
Well, they can just upgrade to anytime access and then just put it on
Put it on slow-mo. Yeah. No, but yeah, I mean, you see what I'm doing. In essence, like I said, I'm just taking out the cymbal bleed. Here's the, we don't need that in the record, It's just the cymbals and stuff coming through the tom mics. Like I mic the toms because I want to, capture the toms. And of course, I've done this a few times. Awesome.
Yeah.
But I've gotten all the cymbals, the bleed out of the tom mics there. And
You should be a keyboardist.
yes, I can't shred music on. I can shred some editing at this point. I'm just old. But like I said, this is going to really clean up our drum performance or whatever. Like I said, I mentioned on the first day or whatever about this snare thing. We still got some cymbal bleed on the snare mic. That's just inevitable. We can't get it all out. It's just impossible. But with this, it really helps clean it up enough, usually. there's one of those little glitches. I'm gonna just do a temporary copy and paste for that. This overhead just for just did a temporary fix there. That was just one of those digital dropouts for that due to that preamp glitch we had. But yeah, like I said, that's the basic editing I usually do for the drums. Also at the end of the songs or whatever, of course, you know, like at the if there's cymbal decay or something like that, I usually kind of tidy that up. This is all stuff you can do with automation too, but I just actually do it on the file. Like I avoid automation as much as possible. I use automation sometimes. But yeah, like if you have a drum part with a lot of stops, cymbal chokes and things, you can actually accent. You know, it's kind of, you know, by itself, it might sound a little unnatural to actually cut the silence after the drum chop or whatever, the cymbal choke or whatever, but you can really make the song sound more punchy as an effect. And, you know, depending on the style of music, obviously for rock, I might not do that. But for like a metal project doing the cymbal choke spots, I'll clean out the, you know, the extra cymbal decay and things like that, just to actually make it just really stark, you know, really punchy. Like I said, I've got everything, you know, some stuff in the ballpark. You know, I think it's really important to kind of dial up the tones, you know, EQ wise and things like that with other stuff in the mix. Like what stuff sounds like by itself means nothing to me. Yeah. It needs to, you know, because you can dial up a drum sound by itself soloed and think, oh, this is fantastic, and then listen to it in the mix and like, oh, it's so thin, it's ridiculous, you know. Mm-hmm. So like I said, I usually kind of like, you know, maybe not have the drums a little louder in the mix than you would normally want it, but you know, try to play it in the mix to get an idea of where you need to go EQ wise.